Winning is great. It's fun. But really what has impacted me most is sharing this breed with people who appreciate it, to have helped build this community of people in the States who really appreciate this breed. And so having that community, I think, is probably the thing that I'm, that makes me happiest.
Welcome to the Better Breeder Chronicles, brought to you by Easy Whelp Premium Whelping Boxes. Elevate your breeding program with Easy Whelp. In today's episode, we visit with Patricia Princehouse of the Brise Pyrenean Shepherds. Located in Chardon, Ohio, Patricia is the foremost Pyrenean Shepherd breeder in the United States. Her career highlights include winning 20 national specialties, more than 100 championships, and over 2,000 performance titles. La Brise was the first to breed an AKC Group 1, Reserve, and all-breed Best in Show winning dog, and the top producers of Champions, Group Winners, Best in Show, and Specialty Best of Breed winning dogs. She was the driving force behind the establishment of the Pyrenean Shepherd Club of America, founded in 1987, and the writing of the AKC Breed Standard in 2006. Patricia was the 2019 AKC Herding Group Breeder of the Year, 2018 AKC Agility Breeder of the Year, and was honored by the French Parent Club with honorary lifetime membership, a STEAM recognition for a remarkable breeding career. Those who know Patricia best will tell you she is the most highly regarded and most experienced breeder in the breed, and yet she is always patient and willing to help a fellow breeder or newcomer. Join me now in welcoming the master of La Brise, Patricia Princehouse. Patricia, welcome to the show. I'm really excited for you to share the La Brise story with us today. If you would, take us back to your beginning. How did you get started in purebred dogs?
So our family always had a dog or two. But when I was in 5th grade, I was at, we had these weekly reader books, and we would choose books every week. It would come. And a book came up, and it said the best breeds for boys and girls. And I thought, that sounds great. I was crazy for dogs, crazy for horses. I got this book. It had all these 10 best breeds for boys and girls. And I read this, and I decided I wanted an Irish Wolfhound. Then, because it's a lot like a horse and, that sort of thing. But as I got more interested, read more about purebred dogs and what they were like, that sort of thing, my interests kind of, moved around a little bit. And there was a woman that lived not too far from us that had Siberian Huskies. And I would, sometimes walk by her house, and there would be, dogs in the background. One day there were puppies. And I went up to the fence with the puppies, and she's like, come in, basically socialize our puppies for us, right? So I went, and then I was there all the time, and all over the walls there was art, there were ribbons, there were trophies or whatever, and she told me all these things. I don't even remember what her name was, but that kind of instilled in me that there was a world out there, right? And then I ended up getting, a couple years later, a purebred Great Pyrenees. From there, I had the idea I wanted to show. We had like little neighborhood dog tricks shows, and I would had my Springer mix that we would win all the time. Everyone, we won virtually every single one. And so this idea of shows was there, but I didn't have any other understanding of what shows were really for or how they worked.
Interesting. So you mentioned that Great Pyrenees. That was your very first dog?
Well, yeah. So, it's interesting because a book had come out on the breed in 1977. So that was fairly recently then, right? I was just a kid. By Paul Strang, called The Complete Great Pyrenees. And in it, he talked about the different bloodlines. And he talked about how they were a little bit different from each other. I like the very big dogs, right? And so one of the bloodlines in there, called Esterhazy, the fellow was not really breeding anymore, but he'd given some of his stock. So as I was looking in, Dog World at the ads for the Great Pyrenees and that sort of thing, there was one there. There was a woman named Ilsa McClellan that he had sort of given most of his stock to. So it was called Kaiserstuhl Esterhazy. Esterhazy was the main bloodline. And so I ended up getting a dog from her. And then, like less than a year later, a neighbor of ours said, there are two Great Pyrenees listed for sale in the, I'm from Dayton, Ohio originally, the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Our neighbor was he was actually eventually a colonel. He said, there are two Great Pyrenees for sale on base. And what's the story of this? So we looked into it. I was glad my dad was like in the right mood for this then. And so we ended up getting these two dogs. So then I had three. One of them, it turned out, I didn't realize it then, but it was from a very important kennel called Soleil Kennel, Jack McGoffin, in Kansas. And he was a wonderful dog, just an outstanding dog in every, really. And what I should have done if I'd known what to do is I should have contacted them immediately, and they would have been great mentors and it would have gone from there. But instead, I didn't really know what to do because I got them from these sort of, random people, and Ilsa was older and not really, so I had basically no mentor at that point. I was just kind of making it up as we went along. But we joined the Dayton Kennel Club, and the Dayton Kennel Club had people from all different backgrounds with all different breeds, and I learned from them, even though it wasn't breed specific. And so I learned a lot of things about the dog show world. And as a teenager, I worked a little bit for Joan Allen Wall, who did terriers, and for Lou Schnegelberger, who had Weimaraners, and I would travel with her a little bit and that sort of thing. So I had sort of a dog show family there, but not really a mentor in the breed at that point. And then the same guy, Paul Strang, who wrote that book, started something called the International Great Pyrenees Review. And this pulled together information from all, it's before the internet, right? So people would send pictures and reports of shows and things like that from all over. And some of the articles in there, right, would be from people in France, including Guy Monsencal, who was then the secretary of the French parent club, the Réunion des Amateurs de Chiens Pyrénéens. And he said that the French dogs tended to be much taller than the ones that are found in a lot of the other countries and were sort of different that way. And so when I was, started taking French because the dogs were French, and then a poster went up about a summer abroad program in France.
And how old were you at that time?
14.
14 years old. Okay.
Yeah. I got to Paris, and we were supposed to spend a month in Paris and a month in the countryside. But I'd never lived in town, right? We've always lived either suburban or really countryside. I didn't know how to take a city bus, but I saw, like 2 days after I was there, that there was a dog show at the Porte de Versailles, right, in Paris. It was the Paris Chamber. It was it's like the Westminster, right, or you can do a Royal Canin now. I figured out how to take the bus, and I went to the dog show. And I met all these French breeders of both the Great Pyrenees, and it was the first time I saw in real life the Pyrenean Shepherd. And so I came to the Pyrenean Shepherd, which most people associate me with, through the Great Pyrenees, which was my first breed. And I ended up going to dog shows every weekend. And then eventually one of the exhibitors asked if I could spend the rest of the summer with them. Head of the program said, she's not like the other children, just take her now, So it was dogs, 24/7 the first time I was there, yeah.
So that was a full summer at the age of 14.
It was, about 2 months, yeah. And that's when I met Monsencal he was judging one of the shows we went to. And so I met him and, associated the guy that had been writing those articles with this guy. And that was interesting. So my French wasn't great and his English wasn't great, but we didn't spend a lot of time, but it was good to make that connection.
So I'm guessing when you came home to America, you had been gone 2 months, but probably accumulated 2 decades worth of knowledge with that immersion in those breeds. When you came home, did you have that clear vision of what you wanted to become within the as a breeder?
Well, I don't know that I was looking at an end. I wanted to be involved in the process, right? I've always liked one thing about breeding, it's sort of a creative process. Even when I was, even before I had purebred dogs or anything, and just had the Springer mix, they were neighborhood dogs. And I was thinking, okay, that one's a collie crossed with a shepherd, and that one's a, Siberian crossed with this or whatever. And I was trying to figure out what parts were the best part to come together and that sort of thing. And I decided that the collie shepherd was the better of the mixes because it was more biddable effectively and that sort of thing. So, how to sort of creatively, work with bloodlines is something that was kind of in the air then. And to be controversial, it's in the air now, right? We have, doodles and bugles and whatever, all of these things, right? People think they need this and that, the other thing. And they have fun with it. We don't think in fancy, we don't think that they're being very responsible in a lot of cases. But some of them are, some of them are. I don't care what they're doing as long as they are, doing health checks, raising the puppies properly, giving them good vet care, standing behind them, taking them back when they have to.
At what point did the switch flip for you that Pyrenean Shepherds were going to be the breed that you were going to focus on?
The dog that I mentioned, the Great Pyrenees, he had been bred before. And after we got him, people came to us wanting to breed to him. And so that provided a transition. And then we got a bitch that I really liked. And I started having puppies. So I had quite a number of litters before I got Pyrenean Shepherds. But when I had the idea in mind that when I went back to France the next time, I would get a Pure Shep, right? I just wanted one, kind of like a mascot. I only ever intended to have one. And with all of the other things that were going along with the Great Pyrenees, at one point, I should say, I had more than 20 Great Pyrenees at one point, right? We had a large acreage and big fields and this sort of thing. And I had horses and I had sheep and goats and all this stuff. And the one Pure Shep I ended up getting, which was from Monsencal, she would help out on the farm, that sort of thing. But I was, Great Pyrenees was where my attention was. And I was also placing them with farmers as livestock guardian dogs, because that was getting big right when I was starting to breed. It was really an interesting experiment. I donated some dogs to the Idaho sheep experimental station, where they were looking at different breeds, putting them together. It was really interesting, and developed kind of a recommendations for how people should introduce their puppy to the sheep, how they should raise them, bring them along, things like that. There have been some fads since then, but I stick to what we developed with the Idaho Sheep Station. It works every time. My dogs, my livestock guardian dogs that I put out, are guaranteed to work. Full refund anytime. If you want to give that dog up, no problem. If the dog doesn't work, any reason, no questions asked. And I had a guy come back to me for a second dog once. This would be in like 1981 or two, something like that, whatever. And I said, now here's the same contract. It's the same guarantee as before. He says, you could not get this dog back from me. There's no way anybody's getting this dog back from me, because they work that well. Farmers would see, large operations there, they would lose 100 lambs a year. It would fall to 0 or 1 the first year they have the dog. It was miraculous. And of course, no poison in the environment, all of these great things. Yeah. So that was fun. But to go back to the Pyrenean Shepherd thing, I only meant to have one. I was a teenager when I got her. My first name, her name was Urunia de l'Estobé. Estobé is Guy Monsencal's kennel. I called her Blythe. But when Monsencal came, and also Pécu, by that time Monsencal was the president of the French club. Pécu was the secretary. They came over to judge a big Great Pyrenees show, a specialty. Canada. And I went up, and I always have my Pure Shep with me. She went to class with me. She was everywhere, always. They saw her and they said, this is a really good dog. And I said, well, I like her. I mean, I think you can always see your own dog's faults, right? So I'm like, oh, well, maybe she's a little close behind. Maybe this. And they're like, no, you don't understand. This dog is exceptional. You must breed her. I thought, okay, well, we'll go to France again and enter her in some shows, see how she does. And the first show that we went to, she won the breed and was pulled in group. And the group judge told me afterwards she would have won the group, except she's too fat. They should be thin, thin, thin. The Pure Shep should be skin and bones to do its job. In America, she was at a good weight. But there, no, it's too much. But she would have won the group that is. I thought, okay, I guess they know what they're talking about, She came into heat while we were there. I bred her, came home, puppies. And that's when we started the club, because you need to have a breed club if you're going to have a breed there. So that's how that transition took place. And then sort of gradually over the next maybe 5 years or so, the Pyre Sheps came more into focus, although I was still doing a lot with the Great Pyres.
So I have to ask, it's kind of a unique situation where the individuals you're getting your dogs from, the mentors that you have in that new breed for you, are all across the ocean. I mean, today we have Zoom. We can jump on and talk face to face like this. What was that process like of being mentored by great breeders that are so far away?
So one thing I did that time, and also the next time I went, that was like a year or two later, I had some of these little bound, books, like journal books, And everywhere I went, I wrote down the name of each dog and a description of it, right? So I would visit kennels and I would look at the dogs and I would talk to the people. They would tell me all kinds of things, right? And so I had that written down by individual. And so we had a lot of contact at the time, intense contact, right, at the time, with a bunch of different ones. One thing to understand about how breeding is done, at least in the Pyrenean Shepherd in France, is that it's more of a consortium, at least how my mentor did it, right? Mansencal was the focus. He is very outspoken. He was in his heyday, he was one of only 6 all-round judges in France. Only 6, right? He's very well known for being highly opinionated and that sort of thing, right? So there were never any questions of what his opinion was, right, at any time, right? But what he had then, he would have a certain number of dogs at his house that were often, the ones that were being shown or bred, that sort of thing. But he would also have, especially he would have the stud dogs. He would also have, there was just a whole consortium of people up in the mountains, in the Pyrenees Mountains, who were farmers, effectively. And they had these dogs, many of them in their families for generations, as had, So there were different breeders up there, and they would generally be breeding to the same kind of little stable of stud dogs that were around, trying them out with different ones, sometimes bringing a dog in because it's their origin, their area of origin. You can have unregistered dogs come into the stud book. And so there was a certain amount of that from the herding dogs, the working dogs up in the mountains, that would kind of like filter in through these rural breeders and then eventually to Mansencal and then out into other areas in France and eventually beyond France for people that cared about those breeds. And so it was that, that's the context there. So he was my mentor, but the field was much bigger and there were more people involved. And I did visit some of those folks out in the countryside. I ended up getting dogs. I'm jumping ahead a little here, but I ended up getting dogs from a number of those folks through Mansencal, through other people. But I ended up with a bunch of dogs that were originally from a fellow named Monsieur Clermont, whom I never actually met. But I ended up with dogs of his. These were the best movers ever. And this is a breed that moves. It's spectacular moving dogs.
Are these dogs closely related, or are they completely separate gene pools within the breed?
My first bitch, Urunya, right? She came from Mansencal, from dogs that were at his house, right? That were all his breeding. And then for the second one, when I took her back to France to breed, she was mildly epileptic.
Okay.
He had mild epilepsy, very mild. But, it's a little scary. The first time it happened, she was like 3 maybe, I don't know. And I didn't know much about it. There's still not a lot known about it, actually. And the French folks explained to me that this is a dog with an excess of nervous energy, right? Just like an Italian greyhound has this excess, and that sometimes it just seems to bubble over and there's a seizure. It's not really a big deal, right? And again, you've got a dog, if you think about it, I mean, I know people tend to be absolutely horrified by any health issue. It never caused her a problem. It was just not the kind of seizures where the dog will seize to death. She would have a small shaking fit a couple times a year, and that was it. No working dog was bothered by that. So a lot of the working dogs up in the mountains have epilepsy. Mild epilepsy. We don't have, some of these breeds I know have epilepsy where the dog dies from a seizure. That's not how it is in pure sheps. But, so I'm like, okay, I don't know, 19. I'm like, they're telling me this is not a hereditary thing. So we'll breed her back to her outstanding grandfather.
Okay.
Outstanding. The pedigree on this bitch was to die for, and it showed, right? So I go there. He's at somebody else's house in the countryside. I go out there, bring the bitch. The dog goes to mount the bitch and falls over in a seizure. And the woman grabs the dog and starts hitting him upside the head to bring him out of it. And then he's like, I want nothing to do with that, but this is too much, So I thought, okay, let's not breed to the dog that's epileptic, So I came back and I did breed to a different dog, which was more of an outcross, but it's still the same general bloodline. And we had some very nice puppies from that. So it's all, again, in the consortium, but they can be from different breeders. But at that time, since I didn't get puppies from this incredible dog called Muscadin, right? I was talking to Manson-Cal at his place, and I said, I'll have puppies from this bitch, but I really like that dog, and I'm not sure what to do. She has a puppy that's sired by that dog. And I'm wondering, I'm not sure what to do. He says, well, take that one. Buy that dog from her. You don't always see this with American breeders where you're talking to them. They're like, buy the dog for me, right? He's like, well, no, go buy, if that's what you think, right? He says, you do what you think, not what I tell you. You do what you think. If you want that dog, go buy that dog. So I bought the dog. And I came back. Yeah, he's not like this with everybody, but he was like that with me. So I think possibly because what you're saying, I was at a distance, right? He knew I would have to be doing things independently. When I first got the dog, my first bitch, I had looked at other breeders. I had tried to buy a dog from a woman named Mademoiselle Lamazou Bebede, who had been breeding dogs, Great Pyrenees, in the 20s. Mary Crane, who introduced Great Pyrenees to this country, she bought dogs from this woman that I tried to buy a pure shep from. I actually did end up with a daughter of one of her dogs, a great pair. And so it was nice 5-month-old brindle male running around the barn, whatever. And I'm like, he moved well, he looks great. I'm like, I'd like to buy that puppy. She's like, have you been to Monsieur Monsencal's? I said, well, not yet. After you go to Monsieur Monsencal's house, you will not want this puppy. And I went there, and he has the dogs there, and they were a revelation. Everything that puppy had, if you'd never seen Monsencal's dog, she was exactly right. This dog was wonderful, right? Movement, everything. His dogs had just something more, just a bit more, right? A bit more head type, a bit more neck, a bit more reach, a bit more drive, a bit more outline. Everything was just amazing. So that was how I got Blythe. I wanted a brindle male. I liked the color. I thought a male would be a good idea, whatever. That's what I wanted. There was a brindle male in the litter. And I said, I'd like to reserve the brindle male. He says, you'll have the dog that's the best one because you're going to take her there. And this is the only one that most people will ever see. So you'll have the best one regardless of what it looks like. And I got the fawn merle female, and I have no regrets. So sometimes you have to listen, and I did. And other times, you and I tried to do this with people who've gotten dogs from me. Some people will call and ask me for advice a lot, including performance people, because the mind of the pure shep is different from other breeds. It really is. And they'll say, okay, they're doing this. How do you think we can do that? Even though I'm not a splendid agility person or anything like that, I've put some titles on, but not a lot, right? And they were talking even world team members, and so we'll work out a solution of how it might, that sort of thing. And people that are breeding will call me and they'll say, okay, what about this dog, this pedigree, this bloodline? What have you seen from this? Because I know the dogs in Europe. A lot of people import dogs here. They don't know it's a pig and a poke, right? If they would ask me before they import those dogs, they would know more about them, but they never ask. After they get them, they don't ask either. But people that have dogs from me or a few other people, will ask me about certain things or just in general about the breed, about genetic issues, this sort of thing. As I mentioned, the epilepsy issue, I am 100% convinced that it is hereditary. We bred away from it, right? We tried to gradually breed away from the epilepsy. There's still no genetic tests for it, right? It's multifactorial, quite multifactorial. We bred away from it over a period of 15, 20 years. And I have not, it's been more than 10 years since I last had even a mild epileptic. So we just gradually bred away from it without losing type, without losing temperament, without losing working ability, all of these things, soundness, movement, we want the whole package. And I had it so much from these people that had, entrusted me with these dogs from France. I can say with my Great Pyres, I kind of built what I had. With the Pyrsheps, I'm just sort of the caretaker for it. I got these splendid dogs, splendid. And my job has been not to screw it up, right? And I'm told I'm one of the few that haven't. So there are like a handful of people that people sort of recognize that have had dogs from Mount St. Cal whose dogs still look that way. And there are some of them in different countries or have been. So that was the sort of context in which these things happened. And so you're trying to do all of this to really shape it into, okay, I regard dog breeds, natural dog breeds, right, as vestiges of cultural history, right? These dogs came from a particular place at a particular time period, in a particular, cultural setting. Right. In this case, the Pyrenean breeds came from the Pyrenees Mountains. It's a very medieval sort of situation where there are not a lot of people, large flocks of sheep, also mixed in goats, cattle, even pigs. Right. The younger son of a peasant family would go up into the mountains for at least the summer, if not a couple years, to raise up these large flocks of sheep. He would have a couple Pyrsheps, maybe a few more, and a Great Pyre or two. He would have a donkey. In some of the old lithographs from the 19th century, you'll see a guy in customs or a costume, right, traditional costume, traditional dress, with a Great Pyre there. There might be a Pyrshep or not. There might be some sheep, and he's walking a donkey with him. And the donkey has what looks like a casket on the back. I wondered about this because I would see it here and there. And I finally learned it's not a casket, it's a box to sleep in at night, because there are no places there, right? There are very few shepherd's huts. So you're really talking a wilderness setting. Most herding dogs are farm dogs, right? They take the sheep out to the pasture, they bring them in at night, they put them in the barn, they do all these things. This is a wilderness herding dog. It's very different. And that's why it looks so different. Most herding breeds, you want a kind of a square, long, maybe a little bit long, level top line, this sort of thing, sturdy, right? This is a dog that needed to go, streaking across around boulders, up on top, around, they were in a wilderness setting up in the mountains to keep a sheep from going over the edge of a cliff, because they will. Sheep are notoriously not terribly smart, right? And so the dog would have to go up there and cut it off and have it go back down before. And even today, they will get marooned. Sometimes sheep simply have to be abandoned up in the mountains because they've gotten themselves onto some little ledge like this, and they won't go back the way they came. And it's a long drop down. And you hope that they'll come back and figure it out. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. So even today, because you have to fly a helicopter in there or something, right? So anyway, so this dog is, it's put together. So I tell people when we do judges that the top line starts with the top of the head, right? The top of the head, it goes into a nice arched neck, goes into a nice shoulder. You want to see a lot of neck there, right? Way laid back shoulder, right? The shoulder blades should be very long, right? You want to see a little bump above the tops of the spines there, because it's that long, right? Level over the rib cage. You want a long rib cage, lung power. They are up in the mountains. Level over that, and then an arch over the loin, so that arch, the top of that, is higher actually than even those shoulder blades. It says we put slight when we were at the standards, slight arch, because we didn't want an Old English, right? We don't want it exaggerated. But it is that the top of the loin is higher than the shoulder blades. It is a definite arch, right? And then this croup slips off, and then you get this, coming down the thigh, rounding down to a long second thigh and a very short hock. So the top line starts at the top of the skull. It comes down, arch, little bump for the shoulder blades, flat over there, arch over the loin, and then down and around and short. And all of that, it's like a rubber band ready to let go. Right. And so when they're trotting, it's under control. Right. And you can see this long, they have a flying trot. So when they reach out, they've got a glide phase there. Right. And so it's really nice. It's beautiful to look at. Right. But when they're up in the mountains and they're letting loose and really flying, they've got a double suspension gallop. And all of that is let go. Their toes are pointed up in front, their toes are pointed back, and it flattens out. That entire dog flattens out. And you see why the dog looks like that and why it needs to be one continuous dog. And that's what I got, right? You can't make this. You can't create this. It comes down from thousands of years, right? And you see them even in art in the medieval times. And then, of course, in lithographs and things. And dogs, when you first get photography around 1900, you see some of these little dogs. And my goal is to have them look just like that and be able to do the things just like that. We'll see even in the pictures, in the photos that were taken of shepherds, like in the, 1905, 1912, this sort of thing. You'll see a bunch of shepherds standing there. These are little guys with berets, right? And each one has a dog in front of him. They're not sure about having their picture taken. And some of the dogs are not just sitting there, they're leaning up back against the guy. The breed is very tactile. They want to be in touch with you. And so here, even these crusty old shepherds with their little dog, the dog is snuggling in order to maintain that, because they're living 24/7 with these dogs, right? They are working companions. And so you can even see not just how the dog looks, but how it acts in those old pictures.
Fellow breeders, see what your breeding program has been missing with Easy Whelp modular whelping boxes. From the durable Easy Classic design to the spacious Easy Classic Tall, Easy Whelp sets a new standard for premium design and performance. Their innovative models are developed for simple setup and maximum safety, with features like integrated safety rails to protect your next generation. The smooth, hygienic surface allows for quick wipe downs to maintain a sanitary environment. The new windowed wall option provides the next level of safety, confidence, and convenience. No tools are required for assembly, which comes in handy if time is short in those critical moments. Elevate your breeding program today. Visit easywhelp.com. How many dogs in early days did you end up importing to create your breeding program?
So then I went back a couple of years later, and I was looking for another stud dog to breed my bitch to. Where should I go next, right? And so I went to a breeder whose dogs mostly came from Mons and Cal, actually a lot from Clermont, specifically within the sort of Mons and Cal consortium, right? I ended up with him because I went to the Paris Dog Show, and just, again, like Westminster, right? Went to the Paris Dog Show. It was a big entry. And I looked at the males. There was a good entry of males. And I saw a male that I thought was just stunning. And I thought, as I'm watching him go around, I'm like, he's going to win everything. And then, people are going to say, oh, she just bred to him because he's the big winner, right? He went fifth. But I sort of followed that breeder home. I said, I want to breed to this dog. And then I found out he's actually the sire of the dog that won. So all the better, right? So I ended up going back to this breeder who was in the Savoie, the Haute-Savoie region. And if we had more time, I'd tell you about that trip. But anyway, he got there. He had quite a lot of dogs. It's a situation, so that's near the Alps. And so even though it's not the Pyrenees, they're still using these little dogs in much the same way. So I actually helped him take his sheep up to the mountains. And my bitch helped with the herding, which I was very pleased with. We were just tourists, but they're like, you have a dog, we should use every dog. You put her to work. And she did a good job. They were impressed. So I bred her to that dog. She's very convenient at coming into heat when she's supposed to, right? So I bred her to this dog, whose parents were Orme and Lorca. His dog's name was Aneu. That was his registered name as well, right? And these are pure Clermont dogs, right? Spectacular. They repeated the breeding that produced that dog 5 times. They were all splendid, right? So I didn't know that when I saw him, right? I learned some of these after. I'm like, that's the dog. So I bred to him, came home, I also bought a bitch when I was there. And this was also a bitch from Clermont. Just again, I sort of, never even met the guy, right? And she was a smooth face. The smooth faced variety is maybe 10% of the breed. I really wanted one. She was lovely, beautiful mover, everything. I left her there to be bred. And I then imported her after she was bred, right? And this produced a dog called La Brise Cottontail Rabbit, right, from my early breeding. And he was a terrific stud dog. He won the national specialty 5 or 6 times. He was just as splendid as his father. I mean, he really kept that up. So I had those bloodlines come in. And so those are from, breeders that are using the same, the same general bloodline as Mountain Cal. But you'll get some, especially from up in the mountains, you'll get them from these different mountain breeders, right? So I brought it a little bit more that way. And I met that same time, that same Paris show, Jacques Denis from Belgium. He had the dog actually that won that day. It's the son of Anaïu, right? His name was La Dure du Val d'Arez. And it's just, again, a beautiful dog, just a beautiful dog, right? And so I got to be pretty good friends with him there, and then talking with him a bit, later, maybe 5 or so years later, we had him judge here. We judged our national. He put up a smooth face, which is very nice, that I got from another breeder, a little more distantly related. That dog, unfortunately, was dysplastic, so we have nothing from him. So, you have to weigh these things because they did no x-raying there, right? And so you have to make a decision. Maybe use a mildly dysplastic dog, if you're trying to go away from epilepsy, this sort of thing. You had to balance it out early on, because if you whittle off too many things, you have nothing left, right? You have to see it as something that's evolving on its own, right? Anyway, I asked, then I wanted to import a bitch. I ended up getting a dog and a bitch. And then about 6 months later, I said, I need a fawn bitch for somebody that wanted one, right? And he had the litter. I liked the breeding. I had the litter. I call him, I check on the puppies, whatever. He's like, yeah, the fawn bitch, she's doing fine or whatever. And check a little, a couple weeks later. And he says, I'd like to keep this fawn bitch. And I'm like, oh, come on, you have all these dogs, whatever. He says, okay. He says, I will give you this bitch, but you must not place her. You must keep her because she's extraordinary. I said you could have her, but not to place. And she was in many ways my second foundation bitch, right? So she came from Belgium. It's all sort of Mansencal and that consortium bloodlines, but it's been several generations, independent, right? So if you can have somebody who, on one hand, like this fellow in the Savoie, like Jacques Denis in Belgium, like some people I later got a dog from in the Alsace region, right? They have pretty much the same origins, but you've got 3, 4, 5 generations in between. That shuffles out some of the potential problems of rare recessives and other disease genes and stuff like that, while keeping the type. And it's apples and apples. So people say, I brought in an outcross. It's not really an outcross, right? Back there, you've got. Now, for real outcrosses, I did bring in a couple dogs that had 1/4 dogs from the mountains, unregistered dogs from the mountains. And for that really is, to a certain extent, an outcross. It's not from that same foundation. And so I found that when you had sort of a real outcross like that, you can breed very close.
You mean in the generations coming down after the outcross?
So if you breed that dog to another one here, and you take that half sibling to that one, right, and breed that, people might say, oh, half sibling breeding, that's too close. You've got a full outcross there, right? And so I find that a very tightly inbred, breeding with 1/4 full outcross gives you some of the best dogs.
So what you're talking about there, in our established breeds, what we think of an outcross, when you're breeding to an unregistered mountain dog, that is as dramatic an outcross as you're ever going to make in purebred dogs. Did you find that it was more difficult to retain your breed type with these dramatic outcrosses, or was the line bred pedigrees behind your dogs strong enough to still produce a quality dog?
One thing about pure Shephs that's different from a lot of breeds, right? And I'm thinking here, for example, when they went to get the Basenjis from Africa, right? They bring them back. They don't really quite look like what we had here, although I think they look cool. But anyway, because this is kind of the wellspring of the breed, right? The type that's set in the breed is set there because of the job they were doing in the mountains. Those dogs had outstanding type. There's nothing to worry about, right? Folding them in, just underlines and enhances breed type for those dogs.
These unregistered mountain dogs, they did not look like a different breed.
No, they looked the same
They
as
looked just
mine.
like what you were
Yes.
working with, so it was
Yeah.
type to type.
It was type to type, yeah, because that's where they come from, and that's what we're going for, is to look like those dogs. I mean, you see these dogs in the pictures from the teens and 20s, right? 100 years ago, right? And you see that same dog with that outline that I was describing, with that short little hock. You see that whole thing. It's very stylized. It comes from there. I'm just maintaining it, right? We're not creating it. So what they did bring in, though, the dogs from the mountains, is that farmers and you'll see this in a lot of breeds, they don't do health checks, right? The dog works or it doesn't work, right? It has the soundness to do the job or it doesn't, right? And so the epilepsy, these sorts of things, mild hip dysplasia in spades from those unregistered dogs. So they brought in some issues that we had to contend with.
Okay.
And so again, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You have to work toward it. And we've, been very successful, breeding out the epilepsy. Very rare that we get. Now, unfortunately, there's some people that are importing dogs fairly randomly. They've got it back, unfortunately. But as far as the dogs that I'm talking about and the sort of main folks in the club, that sort of thing, extremely rare. Hip dysplasia, again, 20-25% early on had hip dysplasia. Most of it only on X-ray. There are a lot of dogs that move beautifully that actually on X-ray are not clear. So again, you take that into account, you gradually breed away. I have quite a number of OFA excellent dogs now, right? And I have within the bloodline, I'll have, sub bloodlines that are super strong on hips. So if you have something that's great on something that's a little bit shaky on hips, you breed it to that side, right? So that you keep a population of the things that you want. You're never going to have, well, I shouldn't say never, but absolutely everything in one dog. People say, oh, how do you breed dogs? You breed the best to the best, right? Then you would only have one dog and one bitch each year. There would be bred, you'd have one litter, right? That is nonsense. Doesn't make any sense when you try to, where the rubber meets the road. You have a population of dogs. You need to know what that population is like. What are the strengths and weaknesses within it? What sorts of virtues are there but rare? What kind of virtues are there but that are common, right? This sort of thing, and try to balance it out so that you bring the whole population along. And you're constantly, there's a guy at the University of Chicago named Van Valen. He has something called the Red Queen hypothesis. This is in evolutionary biology. And he says that the thing about the Red Queen, she was always running in order to stay in the same place. And so in breeding, at a population level, you're always running just to keep that level of quality about in the same place. This idea of improving, that might be nice, and we've done it on the health issues, right? Epilepsy, hip dysplasia, sublux patellis, those sort of major things. And also improve the bites some. Because in the French lines, even though it's a DQ and you can't breed them, there are a lot of undershot bites. We've improved that a little bit as well. But as far as the issues of type and movement and stuff, to keep those in the population at that level, you've constantly got to be selecting for them to keep that. So it's a little bit that way.
With every breeding, it's looking at, the strength and weaknesses of each dog and making sure that you are compensating for that when you are selecting their mate versus just breeding the best to the best. You're having strengths and weaknesses and you're matching those up so that hopefully in the resulting next generation, they balance each other out and you come closer to the desired.
So I think that when you're looking at the population of dogs, you're breeding individuals to each other with that kind of thing in mind, right? Obviously, you're not going to breed a bad bite to a bad bite, right? You're not going to do something like that. But you can't always be balancing out everything. And what you get then is mediocrity, right? So looking again at the population as a whole, what do we need more of in this population, right? What do we need to not sort of slip off somewhere? Coat texture, for example. In France, unfortunately, now with this sort of new generation of breeders, there's a lot of poor coat texture. I don't know what they think they're doing, right? Coat texture, if you lose it, it's very hard to get back, right? So if I've got a dog that's maybe an extremely nice dog, but it's got great coat texture, that dog's going to probably be used more than it otherwise would have, right? Even if you, so, and what I especially want to do, I want to breed that dog to a bitch with good coat texture. I want to sort of double up on that, right? So that you get sort of a part of the population that has good coat texture, or that has excellent OFA, excellent hips, or that has, really eye shape, things like that. Or the short hock is hard to keep, right? And then you'll know where to go to try to maintain that in the population. And people will come and ask me, what do I think maybe they should do? And I'll ask them what they're looking to get out, right? Because if they only have one bitch or maybe three or something like that, they can't worry about the whole population. But I can tell them, okay, you need a shorter hock, or you need more front extension, or you need something like that. I'm like, you could try that dog over there because that dog's been producing well that way. So there's just a lot of different ways that people breed, even me. I do, though, I should say, I have one thing, and again, going back to Mansencal, he would breed a stud dog early. You'll read about this in old books like U.S. and England too, that they train their stud dog. They'll breed these dogs at 6, 7, 8 months for the first time. And not only does the dog then learn, how to behave itself when a bitch is ready, this sort of thing, a lot of that, only that sort of genuine experience is going to teach them, right? You can't reconstruct their environment later. But you also then you get to an early snapshot of what that dog's going to produce, right? And so he did that a lot. Every stud dog was tried out that way. Often they couldn't even register them because in France they have to be of a certain age, they have to be confirmed. But here, so I did use some of the dogs early like that, and I did get that window into what they're likely to produce. And then, maybe not breed them for a few years. And then later, once they've grown up, see, okay, that dog is producing. We can breed him to these bitches and, to advantage like that. It's also, a lot of people in the dog world know Hutch, Dr. Hutchison, reproductive specialist. He says he wants these bitches bred as young as possible. He said that is where they're flexible, the uterus is in the best condition, this sort of thing. He's like, as soon as they are physically like mature enough to carry a litter, like even like 10 months, 12 months, this sort of thing, breed them, get whatever litters you want, and then you can spay them. But that's when it's healthiest. And so I've sometimes, in France, a year-old is sort of a mature, an adult dog, right? So early on, especially, I would breed some of these bitches. They would have their puppies easily. No problem. They're so easy compared to the Great Pyrenees. So easy, right? Not that there are never problems, but, and then having, had that early pregnancy physically, they whelp easily into, and I mean, in France, I'm seeing them, they were bred age 10, even age 12. I saw a 15-year-old bitch with puppies one time. She was stunning. She was in great health, and I said, actually, there was another one that was bred as well, and I saw it was an accidental breeding. They didn't, and I said, if she has puppies, I want one because she was a stunning, this sort of thing. Anyway, there's always a balancing act between what's best for sort of agricultural practices, which is to breed and train those individuals when they're young, quite young. But then there's also the scientific aspect of what might they be carrying, what diseases haven't manifested yet. We want to see x-rays after age 2. So I try to dabble a little bit in that younger, breeding, just to see what you get. And then hold off, And then I had a very nice litter last year from an 8-year-old bitch, 4 puppies, beautiful puppies, no problem, pop, pop, pop.
You've mentioned a couple of times viewing yourself as the caretaker of this breed, particularly in this country. Do you find that you are still breeding in a similar manner to your mentors in France, or are you kind of putting your own twist on it, learning from the generations and doing things differently than they might have done?
So I feel like I don't have the luxury of simply like walking up into the mountains and saying, I'm going to breed this bitch to that dog that's herding sheep. There are no health checks, right? There's this sort of thing, right? And that's how we ended up with 25% dysplasia coming in, this sort of thing, with epilepsy, with sublux patellas, which are also now, I can't remember the last time I had one, right? So I'm held back from implementing that approach fully. because I want to see, I want the whole package, right? Here's one of my pet peeves: people that breed for color, right? So breed with all kinds of colors. There's fawn and black and gray and brindle and blue merle and these sorts of things. And they're like, I want the really pretty blue merle, the ice blue, like the Shelties have, That is not in the standard, right? The dogs, you can see them from 100 years ago. The merles are rusty. It's not going to help them herd the sheep, right? And I said, the day I breed for color, everything else is going to be perfect. Everything else: type, temperament, movement, health, everything, before I breed for color. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I think I am a little more in that traditional mode than most breeders of most breeds here, where it's done as a kind of a chess puzzle, rather than more intuitively of, knowing.
My fellow breeders, I'm excited to announce the Better Breeders Certification Program. This program recognizes purebred dog breeders dedicated to the preservation and advancement of their breed. The Better Breeder Institute certifies purposeful conservation breeders who produce healthy, beautiful, and predictable puppies, and who raise the bar with their ethics and breeding practices. Conservation dog breeders have long struggled to differentiate themselves from the backyard, for-profit, and commercial breeders in the minds of the general public. This is the only breeder certification program developed to help purebred puppy shoppers identify better breeders. This program directly supports breed health research and promotes the breeding of dogs that fulfill their breed standard. This is the first breeder merit program that truly supports efforts to breed a better dog. Learn more at betterbreeder.org. You talked a little bit about the proper outline and balance of a Pyrenean Shepherd. Can you share some of your insights into your own selection process and how you're selecting the individuals you wish to move forward with in your breeding program?
Right now, today, the features that I'm kind of privileging in making choices about breeding is outstanding head and expression, because this is, you always want that, but it used to be much more common in Europe. And in those dogs from the mountains, you still see it some. But in the show ring in France right now, you don't see that many dogs with good expression. It's easy to lose. So I have some dogs with really stunning expression, and I am trying hard to keep that because it's not out there to outcross to. We have to, have that strong pigmentation, eye, this sort of thing, triangular shape to the head, the windswept hair on the face. So head, skull structure and expression, extremely important. I have a young dog. He won the national at 14 months under French judge, because it's you can't deny it. The head and expression is there, like the dogs in the 70s and 80s when they were in France in their heyday. So head and expression is very important. You don't want this round apple-headed dog. You're seeing too many of them. I want to see the neck. When you say the neck, it's actually the shoulder that you're talking about. You see the neck because the shoulder isn't sitting up on top of it. If the shoulder is laid back, you see the neck, right? And so it's really not sort of two different things, right? So you want to see the head, you want to see the crest and the neck, you want to see that shoulder. You cannot have the reach without that shoulder. And this is a dog that has a lot of angulation, more than almost any other breed, basically. And so with all of that rear, I mentioned it comes back. You have that short little hock, the long gaskin there, right? That gives that drive. The job of the front end in this breed is to get out of the way. So you have that propulsive force, and the front has to lift enough that you have that glide phase of the flying trot. And so without that shoulder, it doesn't matter what your rear is like, right? You have to have that. And so if you have the head and you have the neck, then you only can have them with the shoulder, and then they can reach. And then you can have, of course, the rest of the dog also has to be there. You have to have that outline and the rise over the loin and all of that. That short hock gives that leverage, right? That propulsion. That's when you get the good gait. So I see too many dogs sort of, worldwide that are losing that gait. And so again, I'm privileging that. My 12-year-old bitch won best gait at the national this year. That's kind of unfortunate.
Patricia, if you would, talk us through the most prominent dogs in the Brise story.
So dogs are prominent for different reasons. I'll mention a few. I could perhaps talk about a totally different handful, but I'll talk about these ones. Some of the early on, I had a dog called Brise Cottontail Rabbit. And he was just a splendid dog, brindle dog, gorgeous mover, won the national like 5 times. He had a huge impact on the breed, both in conformation and in like every performance event. Just a wonderful dog. This was before we were AKC recognized. His grandson was a dog named Zed, Germinal de la Brise. And this was the first dog that we brought out as a special after the breed got recognized. Right. So Germinal was out there the first weekend after after AKC recognition in January of 2009. And he was a beautiful dog in a beautiful color, golden color. The dog had virtually no faults. I mean, he was a stunning dog. And people saw it when he walked in the ring. People who'd never seen the breed before. So he very quickly was the breed's first champion. He was the breed's first group placer, first group winner. He won the national like 6 times. This dog Zed, people were drawn into the breed because of him. Gorgeous mover, everything. Wonderful temperament. Really healthy dog too. He could be crawling with fleas and you wouldn't even know. No scratchings. It's one thing about this breed, they're very healthy. He had then a nephew whose name is Brise Sun Bear. And this dog was called Sunny Bear. And Sunny Bear was a showman. He wasn't only a beautiful dog, but he loved to show. He had this sparkling personality, which all pure Sheps are sparkly, but you don't always see it in public. Sometimes only they're, this sort of thing, because they can be, they're supposed to be, in fact, suspicious to strangers. Sunny Bear would go out there. He'd be jumping in the air. He'd fall into a stack, this sort of thing. And he was the breed's first best in show winner. He had nearly 50 Group 1s. And he produced some excellent. I mean, he was super clean coming and going. His sister also, Mink, who another breeder had his, used that. Kim Rice used that as the basis basically for her bloodline as his sister. And so Sunny Bear had a grandson named Bruce, is Brise Man of War. And this Man of War dog is also a best in show winner.
He's a current dog today, correct?
He's currently being shown. Yeah, he's like 8 now, I think. But he's still being shown. They actually, a good well-bred pure Shep, they hit their stride at like 6. They look their best at like 6. And so a lot of times people will take their puppy to puppy class, to puppy confirmation class, whatever. And you've got some, Doberman Pinscher breeder giving the class, and they're like, this is not a show dog. This dog looks like this, and it's got no hair, and it's said, whatever. And I'm like, ignore these people. It's very easy to tear things down. You wait. At age 3, age 4, that dog is going to look fantastic, and those people will have spayed or neutered the dog because you tore them down, and now the dog is stunning, and we can't use it in a breed with a very small gene pool. So, we are our own worst enemies in this sport. So this Man of War dog is currently being campaigned still. He was the breed's second platinum. His father was a dog I imported, I mentioned earlier, Eclipse de la Petite Ferme de Vire. Also a lovely dog. And so he was the breed's first platinum grand champion. Bruce is the second. Still being shown. Still looking for that next best in show, right? Because he's still, And then you have a number of these different bloodlines that all go back to Cottontail, the first dog that I mentioned. Another lineage that goes back to him, but through some somewhat different dogs, produced a dog called Brise Midnight Magic, or Lupin, who was best of opposite at this year's national. He's 9 now, but also just a beautiful dog. And a lot of people, because he has a wonderful temperament, a lot of people have been pulled into the breed by that dog. Yet another lineage that comes down from Cottontail and from that bitch that I mentioned earlier from Jacques Denis in Belgium, right? Comes down through that, is a dog that's currently being campaigned named Purple. It's a fawn bitch. And her name is RPK, Brise RPK3 Violet Celestial, called Purple, because of her ribbon was purple ribbon. I didn't name her. My her co-breeder, co-owner, Roger Krieger. Anyway, her mother is a dog named Sasha, La Brise Chanson d'Amour. Sasha was really, still is. I mean, she 12, 13, 14, I was like, still very, very lovely. She was reserve best in show at Philadelphia. And in many ways, that put the breed on the map in a way that even the best in shows had not, because it's on the TV. You wouldn't reserve, and people hear about it, they see it. They're like, oh, that dog, okay.
People see it. The general public sees it.
And somewhat the public sees it, although they don't, whatever dog wins at Westminster, they see it on the TV, but they're aware of the breed, if not necessarily the individual dog. So Sasha really broke through that way. And then led, so we have another sort of lineage down from that. So there are multiple sort of sublineages that come down ultimately from Cottontail, and some of them through Sunny Bear, some of them, through other dogs. And so I would say that's one trajectory you could get. I could also do a trajectory on smooth-faced dogs, because we've been talking about rough-faced dogs. And so that's it's a little bit more complicated on the smooth-faced ones, but I have had one. I mean, there's come from the same dogs. So they're both varieties come from the same litters, right? But the smooth-faced dogs are much more plain because they don't have all the hair. But we do have a smooth-faced group winner, his name was Pepper, and Pepper was just a lovely little fawn bitch, nice, perfect natural ear, and it's the move. But they went on the movement. That's what these dogs went on. I don't go in the show ring. The dogs are not that well trained. I take them in. They went on movement, movement and expression. But other people take them and they groom them up and they show them, and then, sort of thing. Then they look what I call the Hollywood look. I don't entirely approve of everything that's too much grooming. It's supposed to be a natural dog. It should look rustic, right? And now a lot of my dogs are corded, and that looks rustic no matter what you do. But it shouldn't look like something other than the breed, right? You shouldn't be grooming them up so that they look different. And if you're bathing them too much or putting conditioner in, sort of thing, it destroys the coat texture. The hair falls straight down. The hair falls in their eyes. This is the opposite of type. And you brought it on yourself by camouflaging the type that the dog actually has. I judged the Great Pyrenees National Specialty a month ago. And there were dogs there that were so backbrushed on their hind legs. Every hair was sticking straight up. The dog looked completely straight in stifle because all the hair was standing on it. I had to put my hand on the hocks to see whether it was an illusion. They groomed these dogs. Most of them, I couldn't even look at them from the side. I just went and went over them, because you should see the outline of the dog. And they're obscuring the outline of some very nice dogs underneath that hair, because people fixate on things. They can't help themselves. The brushing. I mean, you know what I'm talking about in collies and Shelties. It's, when I started out in Great Pyrenees, you would wash the dog, you would bathe the dog, and then you would take it to the show. I didn't own a dryer for like 15 years after I started showing. The coat should be flat lying. It says flat lying, like a wolf.
Thinking back over your story, what are you most proud of?
Winning is great. It's fun. This sort of thing, introducing the breed is great. But really what has impacted me most is sharing this breed with people who appreciate it. To have helped build this community of people in the States who really appreciate this breed. And in many cases, it's pet owners. They love this breed. They understand it. Many of them know the aspects of the breed and can go to a show and pick out the winners. They're just not interested in showing, but they understand the breed and they care about it. And so having that community, I think, is probably the thing that I'm, that makes me happiest. In addition, of course, to just having, when you have dogs that are these good, it's like you live in an art museum. Just to have them walking around, to see them moving, this sort of thing. So to have that situation where you can just see it every day. Those are sort of the things that that keep me sort of going, right? Yeah. Show wins, you win, you lose. People say, "Oh, you win all the time." Nobody loses more than I do, right? Because I have a lot of dogs out there.
So one of the primary focuses here at the Better Breeder Institute is the belief that we need to begin treating our fellow breeders as partners and collaborators rather than competitors and rivals. Can you speak to that, the importance of that, and how it relates to the future of the sport of purebred dogs?
I think that, as I mentioned before, my mentor had a consortium of breeders, right? As part of a sort of, people would trade stud dogs back and forth, right? Sort of thing. You might, even today, they will lend stud dogs for 6 months or something to somebody. We don't tend to have that in this country so much. What we have is a history in this country of people building up very large kennels in the 20s, 30s, 40s, where you would have someone with 100 dogs, right? Wealthy people with who really, were educated on this breed and trying to do a good job, but working sort of in isolation in a lot of ways, right? People would get dogs from them, but it wasn't a sort of consortium, right? Now you don't have people with 100 dogs. There are, how many show kennels in America have 100 dogs? Maybe there might be 5. I know of one, right? People don't say good things about that. But so what we have are people who are going to have smaller, sort of their own breeding program is going to be much smaller. They're not going to have as many choices. So you have to share information in order to let people make, the choice that they want to make for their own small, piece of this entire, population, right? And so you need to collaborate. And I try to do this with people. I will tell them what I see in the puppy, right? Or they'll say, I want a puppy that's going to look like this. And I'll say, this litter over here is probably going to produce that. Maybe there'll be a puppy for you. I've sometimes allowed people to lease bitches that there are lots of breedings I would love to do that I don't have the time, to produce, right? It's very time consuming and expensive. So I have sometimes leased bitches, and they've had a good effect for people. I generally will, let a stud dog be used by somebody. I don't do. I generally will use a dog on an outside bitch and take a puppy as a stud fee, if they want, right? If they, because if it's not a bitch that I would want a puppy from, I won't do that breeding, right? And that kind of says it right there. So if they come to me and I'm willing to take a puppy, then that's a good breeding, right? So, and I'm always happy to tell people, sometimes they'll ask, oh, is this, somebody else's dog or whatever might be good. And I'm happy to tell them about the background of that dog and the background of their own dog and that sort of thing. But, in the same way that I, have asked people, my own mentors and other people. And I mean, like, just as I described, going around France as a teenager and in my 20s, going to the homes of these various peoples, and they'll tell you what they like about their dogs, what they know about this, this sort of thing. And we don't have that tradition in this country. We come from this background where in the 40s, it was a few kennels in each breed with large quantities of stock. And now we have people that have just a few dogs. I mean, relatively few people, I think, that breed purebred dogs have more than 10 dogs at their house. I think very few, really. It gets complicated and expensive really fast, right? And so you have to work together. And so, like right now, for example, we have, I'm in northeastern Ohio, and we have a little consortium of breeders there, right? That people, and sometimes we'll all be breeders on the same litter, but it's basically, and so it's a little bit like, the background that my mentor came from and that sort of thing, where we've got this sort of consortium, and there's a lot of flow back and forth in between. Also, I place a lot of bitches with a puppy back or a litter back, especially in the early days, right? Because even if they're going to an agility home or something, the gene pool is small. They want one of my best dogs. They want that physical, athleticism and stuff. I'm like, okay, but I will need to have a litter back from her. So litter's only like 3 puppies in this breed.
So that's truly a stewardship type of home where they're being placed, but you still have that tie to them. You still view that dog as with the potential to positively impact your program.
Right. As from a breeding perspective, that's what it is. From them, they get a great dog, but they do, and then often they'll want a puppy. from the letters. But that sometimes what people will do then, people who are sort of breeders or for show or this sort of thing, or even are just performance people that then want to breed, they'll redo the breeding that I did. They'll say, okay, that one worked out pretty well. Let's just do that again. And then they've got those puppies. And then that starts a lineage for them.
In the process, you've just brought a new breeder into the sport.
Sometimes, yeah. And I really would like to see more of these performance people doing that. And we're trying to, encourage them. And I could tell you some very sad stories just from the past few years of agility people who have come to the national with their, 4 to 6 month puppy to show it from their first litter to show it in the 4 to 6 month class. And people are ugly to them, right? And then the breeder, young person is, they came across the country with their first homebred dog.
So the next thing I was going to ask you, I think I already know the answer to, based off of a couple of things you've said, including right there. As far as what do you view the most significant challenge to the sport of purebred dogs today?
I think that the obvious, biggest challenge there is our relationship with the public at large, right? People understanding why purebred dogs are produced, why we go to dog shows, why we do the things that we do, right? And why we care about purebred dogs as opposed to crossbred dogs or random bred dogs or things like that, right? And people don't understand because there is an active philosophical movement out there that is opposing purebred dogs, right? And this is the so-called animal rights movement. I feel like often, we're concerned with animal welfare, the individual dog, right? What is best for it? And there are a lot of people out there with a philosophical view that there should not be purebred dogs or that sort of thing. And so when they say animal rights, that's an abstract philosophical concept. I'm worried about the welfare of that dog. Right? Does that dog go into a good home? Does that dog have an opportunity to really fulfill its potential, whether it be in sports or as a pet or whatever, maybe even in the show ring, that sort of thing? And there are people out there that have had purebred dogs in their families as pets for generations. And they're like, they have always, gotten a Welsh Springer or something. That's just what their dogs have been. And they go back to the same breeder, or at least to the same breed and that sort of thing. And that we've gotten away from that a bit. Right, because people will slander purebred dogs, that they have more health problems, these sorts of things, which isn't true. It's just if you look at mixed breed dogs, there's nobody out there following them, making sure, okay, in this generation, how many dogs had a particular health problem, right? Purebred dog breeders pour millions of dollars into health research, right, to try to breed better dogs. And the public has no idea. That's our fault, right, because we can't see straight, right? We can't get out of our own way and let them know. People want to know that. And with a breed like the Pyrenean Shepherd, it's what you might call an heirloom breed, right? This breed is, there are not very many. It could easily disappear if we don't, as you said, steward it, right? And from a genetic standpoint, a good rule of thumb is that 2 puppies from every litter should be bred to maintain genetic diversity, right? And so that gets away a little bit from the absolute best ones only should be bred, right? If you're going to have a population where two dogs out of every litter are being bred, you need to have people that want to join this project. We need people who want to join this project of preserving the Pyrenean Shepherd. And we get them, when they meet somebody, especially if they're like, at a park, at Central Park. I have some dogs that are in New York, they'll meet them, they'll start talking like, this is fascinating. I love that little dog. I would like to join, this project and help this. And then they'll get a puppy and they'll give a litter back, that sort of thing, and then go on with what they had. Lots of people want to be involved in this project of preserving this breeds, and we're very closed to it. We don't let people know.
Are you preparing for your first litter? Or do you want to outfit your whelping room in style? If so, check out Whelping Bundles from Easy Whelp. The Easy Whelp Starter Pack includes a modular whelping box, heating combo, and reusable pad. Step up to the Essentials, Pro, or Elite bundles to add a variety of premium whelping necessities and accessories. Ensure your whelping operation is world-class with Easy Whelp bundles. Visit easywhelp.com today. So, putting a positive spin on that topic, what has you optimistic about the future of your breed?
So the thing that has me optimistic is that I have a number of young people that have dogs, mainly from me, but there are some also that have imported their own that are passionate about this breed. I mean, young people. We're talking 20 years old, people in their 20s, teens and 20s even, 30s, that are starting to be very interested in them. And I am hopeful that this will continue, right? And that we'll be able to interest. It's a nice breed for young people. They're athletic, they're active, they're bright, and this sort of thing. You can do anything with them, and you can take them in the ring. There's almost no grooming to have a dog that looks nice. If you want to be in the best in show ring, you have to do that extra. I'm not convinced you actually do have to do all that extra grooming to win the best in show, but handlers can't help themselves, right? So, but people need to be welcoming to other folks, and we need to be in this sport more welcoming to people who are quite different from what we've had, in the past, right? And we have to be tolerant of people who have different ideas, who don't come in and automatically get acculturated to this long sort of show dog history. So you may have somebody coming in that have had it. At this point, there are kids who've been raised with doodles. They've had 3 generations of doodles in their family, right? They don't understand how things used to be. They don't know. So don't blame them for that. They're discovering that there are purebred dogs with reasons for why they should look and act that way and purposes that they can still fulfill. And I think that's cool. That's not what I grew up with. Instead, you get them pushed out. They don't know the secret password, let these people in. I think personally, there should be a class at dog shows, and it can be a totally separate competition of, for altered dogs, and that people can know that at the dog show between noon and 1 o'clock, we're going to have basically a match for altered dogs. Right? They can come. They don't have to spend their whole day. Kids have soccer, whatever. They can enter in advance, or possibly on the day for a higher entry fee. But know that at noon, when most judges have broken for lunch or whatever, there could be, AKC could do a thing where you have a training program, to judges. They're welcomed in. It can be multiple breeds within the ring at the same time, roughly, maybe even by group or something like that. They come in, they have a positive experience. You evaluate their dog. You don't check the bite. You don't check the testicles. Everybody has a good time. They learn something and they're talking to other pet owners, stuff like that, right? This will, even if those people don't end up going and showing dogs or that sort of thing, they're talking to other people that have breeds or similar breeds or this sort of thing. And they'll go back and you give them a ribbon. Don't give them big prizes. It doesn't have to cost anything for the club, right? They get ribbons. They'll go to their soccer match and they're like, yeah, we came from the dog show. We won this ribbon, or maybe a dog biscuit or whatever. The kids had a great time. And the dog, his behavior's improved because we're taking him there and he knows what to do and this sort of thing. And it's fun, but it has to be ready to go at noon, as we done at 1:30 at the latest. Over. They have a good time. They're drawn in, and don't no pressure and that sort of thing. And I just think this would really work. And pretty soon, some of them, not obviously, even what if 5% of them, then the kids get drawn in? I don't know what else we're going to do. How else are we going to do it?
It's interesting and it's scary and it's eye-opening to hear all the new ideas that I feel it's just starting to build of what we need to do different with dog shows if they're going to survive in this modern society, because society has changed, preferences have changed, priorities have changed, and yet we still are trying to do this dog show thing just the way we've always done it, except there's 4 times more shows and the expenses are astronomically more. But something's going to have to change if this purebred sport is going to be sustainable.
Yeah. Well, part of that also is that people are migrating to, fast cat and other things, other activities that are fun to do with their dogs. So some of them are still doing purebred dog things, but they're not doing that much conformation, right? And so again, that's an obvious, source to pull people back into conformation or pull them into, right? And it doesn't work for the reasons that I said before. The people who are pet owners who already have purebred dogs are already on board, right? They love their dogs. They buy from breeders. There's no place for them at the dog show. Make a place at the dog show for these people. And it's fun, because you get caught up. Oh, maybe you're powdering the hocks of this Scott or Westie and, this sort of thing or whatever. And then you see, you take an hour maybe or 10 minutes. You go and you're with some people that are new. It buoys you as well. Right? You remember why you're doing this, why it's fun, why you love dogs, right? It's just, these things are not that hard, but we've gone down this track and it's isolating. Yeah. And it's hard. I mean, I've talked to people like tobaccers, right? And I'm like, we need to open it up so more dogs are showing and this sort of thing. And when they're like, bite your tongue, that means we don't win as much, right? Maybe we need to not win as much, So, yeah, I'm hopeful that things can work out, but it needs to be. I think there are two aspects, and one is this sort of social aspect that needs to be built up, right? And there are tendencies in society, not just in dog shows, but about all different things. And there was a book a while back called "Bowling Alone." Right. And how people are just getting away from what used to be, Friday night you'd go bowling or the sort of thing. And then gradually people are doing other things. The dog show is like that. Bowling has come back now, but
It has.
But that sort of thing is we aren't doing all of the same leisure things that we used to do, as a country.
Yeah.
Right. And the other thing is this issue of letting people know how ethical people breed dogs and why those are the ethics, right? And that will be interesting for them because they're not going to guess what goes into it, right? And when they understand, how these important things work, they're going to get more respect for the breed and for the sport and for the undertaking, But that also requires education, and it requires educating people that are currently breeding, because there are a lot of people out there that do not follow, best practices. And a lot of that is because they don't know what to do. And they get into a bind and they don't have a mentor that can tell them. And I know you're big on promoting methods and that sort of thing, right? They don't have somebody that they can go to and say, this puppy has something wrong with it. I don't know what it is. I don't know if I should place this puppy. Maybe it's fine. The vet doesn't know. The vet says, I don't know what I'm talking about. I think there's something wrong with this puppy. Should I place it? Should I not place it? Vet says it's okay to place, but I think there's something wrong. Hard things like that, right? They should have a person to go to. It doesn't have to be in their breed. It can be, and I think that we get mentored by people from other breeds a lot. I know I have. And that was one thing that the recently deceased Havanese breeder, Ruth Ellen Vile, who showed her son, Roger, is involved in Pure Chefs, whatever. She showed a lot of them, whatever. I would talk to her for hours, right? And she's, multiple generation dog show, just about all these things, totally different breeds, right? She had Pekingese, Havanese, and Bichon, but all of these issues the same. And when she had an issue pop up, a genetic issue that nobody admitted, was around, she asked me, what do you think about this? And we looked at pedigrees. I learned all this stuff about Havanese pedigrees. We went to talk to people at Cornell. We set up a thing. And then now, there's a test for this problem that came up, and other breeders can benefit from it. Nobody else in Havanese would have known that. But sometimes people in another breed you can go to. And vice versa. There were things that she told me that I never would have thought about as far as stuff. And so people need to be educated who are already breeding, and they need to be encouraged. I mean, they need to become more courageous, right? People need to give them more confidence in that they can make the right choice when difficult situations come up, that they can take this perfectly healthy puppy that's a wonderful puppy, and this home that seems pretty good comes along, but you have a nagging feeling maybe it's not the right one. Just say no. You don't have to, just because you have a puppy for sale doesn't mean you have to sell it to that home that seems perfectly nice, while at the same time knowing that even when everything seems perfect, some of those are going to be, you're going to make mistakes. We are not, you're going to place a puppy with people that don't turn out to be really appropriate for this breed. Or maybe they were when they got the puppy, but 5 years later, they've really gone a different direction. You're going to make mistakes, and there has to be room for that. And there has to be a plan. What do you do when you have a litter of puppies and they don't turn out to be very good? How do you place it? What do you do when you've placed dogs and people are not showing them? They said they would show them. They're not showing them. They're not letting you have your litter back. What do you do about that? Right? There needs to be a lot more communication and a lot more education offered. And I'm not entirely sure how to do that, but I think Facebook is not the way.
You can find countless examples of Facebook groups gone wrong. Is there a breeder you'd like to see featured on the Better Breeder Chronicles? Then go to betterbreeder.org/nominate to let us know. We are looking for master breeders, whether they are highly acclaimed or they work quietly in anonymity to move their breed forward. Better Breeder Chronicles puts those individuals on their rightful pedestal and shares their story with the purebred dog world. Nominate your most respected breeder today. Go to betterbreeder.org/nominate. Patricia, to the aspiring breeder who's listening to the Brise story today, if there was one thing that you'd hope they take away from your story that would help them in their own journey, what would it be?
Well, I think that the most important element you have to have is passion for what you're doing. And you're passionate about something about your dog or the dogs of this breed that you've had so far, right? What is that thing? Find out what that thing is, and follow that. So it's important to be mentored. It's important to have information from a bunch of different sources, including even people in Facebook, right? But stick to what it is that motivates you. What do you value about that dog, right? And these are the sorts of things that I, did and was allowed to do by people around me, right? Go for what your passion really is, because there's a lot of different ways to appreciate a breed, right? A lot of people appreciate different things out of it. There are going to be some that appreciate it for the same reasons you do. Do your breeding program to produce the dogs that you want to own, right? And you continue doing that. You can't do somebody else's deal, right? You do your thing, especially if you're only going to have, 5 or 6 dogs at the house. You follow that passion and educate yourself so that you understand your passion better. You understand why you like that dog, why you like this breed, things like that, and then share it.
Patricia, after your breeding days are done, how do you want breed history to remember Brise Pyrenean Shepherds?
I find it hard to imagine a time when the breeding program will be done. So I can look back and see in other breeds, like in the Great Pyrenees, how great breeders of the past, like Mary Crane, who introduced the breed to this country, how her dogs have been used in different bloodlines and that sort of thing. And people still talk about her, in reverent terms and things like that. But it's such a different world now. You're not going to have, no breeding program, I think, is going to have that impact like people did, that way. So I think that the legacy ultimately that you leave is, bringing people into the sport, letting people use your dogs to create new breeding programs. That's the only way that you will be remembered, actually. I mean, to be very blunt, right? Otherwise, you're just going to disappear, right? So, and the breed with you. So you have to, you'll have succeeded or failed, regardless of what you want, on whether or not that happens.
If breeders want to learn more about your dogs and your breeding program, do you have a website, or where can they go?
I have pureshep.com, and I also have pures.net. I've had a number of different websites over the years, and early on, I had all of the dogs. I had all of the, and I don't have time for that anymore. And so I have kind of a placeholder website, right? And it has some pictures of the dogs and has some information on them. And basically you'll see pictures there, and there's some stuff, but basically people need to contact me. So they can go and take a look, and then and the best way to contact me is by texting me. The number is on the website. You can find my phone number all over the internet. And just text me, and then talking. I find talking on the phone is the next step. And people, if they want to get this breed and they've never seen one, which is often the case, can find somebody in their area that has PureShephs that they can go meet in person, because you can't predict what the dog is like by looking at, no matter how much you've read a description, the dog is unique. But there are pet PureShephs all over the country. And there's in every state, I can direct somebody to meet that breed, right? And then if they really like it, then we can talk about, if they want to get a puppy or that sort of thing, or, who might be in their area that might have a litter, sort of thing. But you would not know from the internet just how many there are out there and where some of these breeders are, because not everybody has a website.
Okay. Patricia, thank you for sharing the LaBrise story with us today. It's greatly appreciated.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
That's it for this chapter of the Better Breeder Chronicles. We hope you found the LaBrise story with Patricia Princehouse captivating, and that it will inspire you to pursue your highest goals in your breeding program. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. At the Better Breeder Institute, we encourage all conservation dog breeders to embrace your fellow breeders as partners and collaborators rather than competitors and rivals. With the unprecedented challenges we all face today, successful breeding programs can no longer operate on an island. Our purebred dog breeder community must come together, with everyone pulling in the same direction. This is crucial if we're going to successfully preserve and advance our beloved breeds. I'm Matt Stelter, closing the book for today. Best wishes to you and your breeding program from all of us at the Better Breeder Institute. We'll see you in the next chapter. Take care.